the Palestine cause is back on the map. It's back in the conversation. Everybody is thinking about it again.
You know, then what happened in the weeks that followed was this vilification of those who had this emotion, because they came up with all these lies that afterwards were disproven and debunked. So then they were like, what? Are you celebrating 40 beheaded babies? Are you celebrating the rape and torture of civilians?
They don't care about their hostages. I don't think anyone can argue. The only time any hostages were really freed on a mass scale was when there was a ceasefire. They've made Gaza into rubble and their hostages are under that rubble, right? That's not how you free hostages.
But what I can definitely say is there is no evidence whatsoever that there was a mass rape campaign at all.
The disbelievers, the hypocrites, they want us to become frustrated. They want us to have despair, to lose interest, to forsake the cause. They want that. They want Gaza to become an example to whoever who dares to resist.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Muslim Podcast Show. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother JK and Brother Khairul. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank
Wa
you for
alaikum
having us.
salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you guys doing?
Alhamdulillah, good. Can't complain. How's things with you?
Yeah, same, can't complain. Just it's just been a bit of a busy year. I'm sure we'll sort of get into it. But listen, you know what? Let's get into it. I think it's been one of those years where it's strange even asking how things are, because ultimately it's as an individual, yeah, alhamdulillah, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is going well. However, you know, as a member of a wider ummah, you know, it's you can't really say that everything's fine and dandy, as they say in Britain. But let's like I said, let's get into it, inshallah. And as it's well, we'll release this on October the 7th. It's still October the 6th today. So if anything happens between now and then, which is noteworthy, please excuse us because we recorded this beforehand. But let's imagine it is October the 7th, and obviously it's now going to be a date which is etched into memory, as in your 9/11s, your 7/7s, you got your October 7th. You know, it's going to be tomorrow. You'll see a the huge propaganda machine go to work, and I would probably advise stay off mainstream media tomorrow because you'll probably feel like vomiting. But yeah, guys, what I want to do really is just have a quick chat with you guys in terms of how we perceive the world a year on, October the 7th, 2023. Obviously, we know that you know, the attacks by the resistance on October the 7th, which led to a response. Even though you probably can't call it a response, but we'll get into that. But we know since then we've had over 40,000 Muslims in Palestine, mainly women and children, made shaheed. We see the current onslaught in Lebanon, and actually the numbers in Gaza are probably closer to 100,000. Some people say even more than that. But just want to get your thoughts on what this year's been like and your reflections on it, really. So, JK, I'll start off with you. What I want to do is, first of all, for you guys, really, is get your quick thoughts now that it's been a year. But on that day, October the 7th, 2023, when you were watching the news, you saw this unprecedented kind of attack out of Gaza. Do you remember the emotions you were feeling at that time? JK, I'll start with you.
Yeah, good question. You have to be a bit careful, but it's a good question. I'll be honest with you, yeah, it was quite of a surprise, to be honest, what was happening, because we have seen for decades, you know, it's our whole lifetime, but even before that, we've seen the onslaught occurring on Gaza, on Palestine at large. So the fact that they kind of try to make it as though history started on October 7th is wrong, and we should always point out that it didn't start on that date, and the whole context of what happened before that needs to be taken into account before judging this one event. So there were emotions of surprise that this is different, actually, very different to what is usually happening in that region. There was an element of curiosity in terms of what's actually happening. There's always these questions of politics, like is this kind of planned? Is this known? Is this you know which actors are involved with this? But I think naturally it was a case of these people, the people of Palestine have been occupied for so many years, decades, and have been persecuted and have had their lives being ripped to shreds even prior to what we've seen in the genocide. So there was an element of, maybe they are kind of fighting back here. The resistance is taking some sort of stance. So overall, I was quite, I was positively surprised, if you want to say that, and also I think it did start to, what's the word, kind of destroy and shatter some of those prior stances that the West would really trying to put in our minds and positions that they'd put in our heads that Israel is some sort of entity that's invincible, can't be touched. They will always, have the Iron Dome, that they're impenetrable. These things were shattered. These myths were shattered on that day because we saw that a very lightly equipped force, through very, simple methods, really, were able to actually penetrate and actually cause an element of damage. But yeah, that was my immediate reaction. I think, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what you brothers think, but that was my immediate thoughts.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, similar. What JK is saying. If I cast my mind back to that day, like you said, there was a bit of surprise, but also, um, that feeling of when the underdog fights back. And many non-Muslims probably don't understand why. You get these questions, isn't it? Or you get these comments like, "How are you celebrating this?" Or there was celebration. Let's be clear. When you look at the videos, when you see around what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, and the Muslims and the Muslim world were celebrating. But what people need to understand is we've been following this for decades, and we could see the persecution that the Muslims were under. We could see constant, year after year, the Zionist entity oppressing, killing, murdering our brothers and sisters, children, women. It was going on for so long. And we've been speaking about the issue of Palestine for many years before that. Many of the podcasts that we were doing on Votu, most of them, if you look at them, were podcasts on Palestine, because there was always something going on. So when that occurred, the first thing was a joyous mood, right? And like I said, you have to be a bit careful, but joyous in the sense that, look, these people are besieged. These people have nothing. They're in an open air prison, and they're fighting back um, against being besieged, being trapped. Um, so
Occupation, yeah.
yeah, that emotion came out, and I can remember straight away when I saw the news, and we were reading up and trying to find out what's actually going on, what's actually happened, and then looking and reading the details of the operation was like, wow, okay, this is crazy. They've literally breached the borders. They've gone in and they've overrode army kind of barracks and all sorts. And the first thing was, why is this happening now? Who is behind it? But also, okay, this is significant. So straight away we put out a blog talking about the event, what happened, what we think probably could be some of the political kind of reasons behind it, who are the actors, but also, so there was a bit of like, let's be careful. Maybe there's something more sinister going on. Maybe have they been allowed to do this? That kind of thing was coming through your head. But the overriding emotion was, as JK said, of kind of, yeah, like joy that the underdogs are fighting back, right?
Yeah, and
yeah.
the other thing to add as well, to be honest, we didn't know that much about the event as well. So from what we knew is, yeah, like you said, the underdog is fighting back. If you would put it in like movie terms, this is the moment in the movie where it's like, yes, they're actually fighting back after all that oppression from the bad guys. They're fighting back. Everyone has that joy when it comes to like Hunger Games, or I don't know. I think about the movies, Lord of the Rings, whatever it may be. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, then what happened in the weeks that followed was this vilification of those who had this emotion because they came up with all these lies that afterwards were disproven and debunked. So then they were like, what? Are you celebrating 40 beheaded babies? Are you celebrating the rape and torture of civilians? Are you celebrating, torture and prisoners being taken and murdering of one? It started off 1,400, by the resistance. And it was like, no, hold on, no, we didn't even know that, to be honest. And then, secondly, a lot of that was debunked, right?
Yeah.
So then it's a case of no, why should we and most people who had that emotion be vilified for having this emotion when this is a natural emotion to be on the side of the occupied over the occupation, on the side of the weak against the powerful. This is a natural emotion to have. But people like Piers Morgan and others vilified people for having this view. People got people's jobs, lost people to lose their jobs for this. But now what's come to light is that all of this propaganda of what actually occurred on the day has turned out to be lies and deception, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I just wanted to caveat that. We didn't know all of that. It wasn't as though we were celebrating, this is the picture they want to portray as Muslims. We're celebrating death. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're celebrating the fact that the weak were able to, for once, do something against the powerful, the occupied doing something against the occupation. So it's definitely worth highlighting that. You've gone,
If you're mute,
sound's gone.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I remember at the time, when the news was coming in, and obviously I think at the time emotions have kicked in. But for myself, this was before, like you said, all the propaganda about kids and stuff like this. The emotions I had was maybe this is the moment where it was at the initial thing was, look, they've started it. Everyone needs to get involved now. It was one of those, right? Obviously, that never happened. Um, but at that time, it felt like maybe this was the time that this was that first, you know, domino which is going to lead. So obviously there was an element of joy, and why shouldn't there be? Because as you guys have said, our brothers and sisters have been persecuted, and they've actually now broken out of this cage. And I think that's why you guys make an interesting point, and maybe we can, speak about that a bit in terms of all the lies, the propaganda, because a year on, we know now that these were blatant lies, and you still hear some, guys on TV still, you know, quote these about babies being burnt and stuff like this, right? But maybe if you think about it, um, I was just thinking about this when JK was speaking that obviously a lot of this was for the consumption of non-Muslims and the West. Like this is what happened. So it wasn't a case of oppressed versus oppressor. It was a case of the barbarians versus victims, right? But also maybe there was an element where it was for Muslim consumption as well, in terms that look at what these guys did. How can you support that? Moving it away from
Yeah.
the issue of jihad, the issue of resistance, the issue of Palestine, right? It's like, how can you do this? And that's why if you watched Low Key's interview with Piers Morgan recently,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've watched it, right?
Hmm.
And you go back to the people who were coming on to the shows, just after October the 7th. Obviously, the classic "Do you condemn October the 7th" was the opening line. However, there was always that question asking the Muslim, personalities, guests, do you condemn this? Do you condemn the actions? And even then, a lot of times, I think Muslims were playing it safe. And this is not an incorrect answer, but they would say that Islam is against innocent lives being lost, right? Um, However, if you watch the low-key interview, basically he said this was resistance in the sense
Hmm.
like, look, it was resistance, and the reality is that the Hannibal Directive was implemented that day,
Yeah.
and this goes back and maybe we can discuss about some of the lies that happened. For example, the 40 beheaded children, the mass rapes, kids being cooked in ovens, right? All of these things. In fact, a year on, we can say that A, these were lies, and B, the actual Zionists have been committing these same crimes over and over again in the past year,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And add to that all the other accusations against, them taking the hostages, and then they were raping the hostages. All of this came out and it was lies, right? This has been exposed now. This has been exposed now, and that's why, just to bring in another question, what do you guys think a year on now? I have my own thoughts, but what do you guys think was the objective for the resistance on that day?
yeah,
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? What was
yeah,
their
yeah. Was
objective?
object.
Was it to retake Palestine, or do you
No.
think the objective was something different? Khairul, I'll start with you. Your
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah. No, I don't think the objective was to retake Palestine, although that is their ultimate objective, because they themselves know that they don't have the capability to do that. I think what the objective was to show to basically show the world, because there were things that were going on at the time, right, with Netanyahu showing the maps in what was it, like a UN,
The UN, yeah, yeah.
yeah, the UN, and normalization going on with the Arab states, the treacherous Arab states, UAE, Saudi, and that was really starting to press ahead, wasn't it, with bin Salman's comments. I think it was a case of them breaking out and saying, "Look, this is around the corner. Normalization is going to happen. We need to do something to stop this because that's going to kill off Palestine forever." And and in a way, it was probably successful because now, if you look in the populations in Saudi and a lot of them now, the Palestine cause is back on the map. Is back in the conversation. Everybody is thinking about it again. So I think that was to really give a short answer. I think that was one of the reasons why. But
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I would agree with that. I think it was to bring Palestine back on the agenda, as like you said, it was kind of they were ramping ahead with the normalization. Literally, I want to say a few days before the October 7th events, bin Salman was on Fox TV, wasn't he, saying that look, we are ready to normalize with the with Israel. So actually, and like I said, that the events in Netanyahu with the maps in the UN. So they did want to put Palestine back on the agenda, but also there's been accounts of where all they wanted to do is to kind of get into they did try to break into that area, but basically they wanted to take a few hostages as a mechanism to use afterward as a kind of what's the word, as a
option tool,
negotiation.
bargaining tool, yeah.
Yeah, bargaining tool. Yeah. So that was the that was the intention. Had they didn't have they had no idea that what they would actually see happen in terms of the Israelis leaving their posts, and the
Yes.
cowardice of these soldiers just leaving their posts, and they're basically being free rein to take many more hostages. Yes, a lot of those propaganda lies didn't happen. We can talk about that, but actually, what did happen is they were able to take many more hostages, and they're hostages than they perceived or they planned to. So that was a surprise. That wasn't planned. But what I can definitely say is there is no evidence whatsoever that there was a mass rape campaign at all. There was no evidence. Even the Nova Music Festival, right? That they didn't intend to go to that festival. They just happened to get to that festival. And also, there's evidence to say a lot of them, when the first kind of shootings were heard in like that region of Israel, that Nova Music Festival, a lot of them had run away basically. They'd heard the sirens and they'd gone. So this kind of lie of, oh yeah, they're all singing and dancing, and these parachuters came down and you know destroyed all of them and killed, that it's just not true. That didn't happen. And we know, like as you mentioned, the Hannibal director, all of these lies around 40 beheaded babies, um, the rape and the murder and killing, as I've said, the targeting of innocent people, the human shields being used, all of this has proven to be a lie. And as you said, the statement comes to mind. Every accusation is in fact a confession. They accused the resistance of these actions, but in fact, it is Israel that has been proven beyond doubt to have committed these actions. So, with the 40 beheaded babies, absolutely no evidence of that. The only evidence there is of one baby who was caught in the crossfire, right? There was no evidence of 40 beheaded babies. There's no evidence of a pregnant woman's womb being ripped open. There's no evidence of infants being, put on washing lines. All of this, and the oven and all of this. There's no evidence, even from their own records. There's no evidence. Even Haaretz and these organized, they found no evidence of this. There's no evidence of them raping their prisoners and all these rape allegations that have been made. There's actually proven to be these people that made these claims were have been proven to have lied in the past as well. So they have an agenda to put this out, but no actual physical, legal evidence that you could use in a court of law. None of that, right? But what we do have evidence of is the Said Taiman detention camp, where there's a video of Israeli IDF soldiers holding up their shields to hide the fact that they are raping a man, subhanallah, a Muslim man, with objects or whatever you want to say, right? And the damage that causes that person is horrific, harrowing, and not only him, that's what they caught. Imagine what's happening to those that weren't filmed, right? And we've seen the images of those being released. What about those that are still in detention? Compare that to the Israelis that were kept as hostages. They're coming out healthy, smiling, shocked at the fact that all these lies we heard about the Hamas and the resistance is in fact untrue. They're shaking their hands, smiling, and leaving. So you tell me, who are the real, who are the real rapists and terrorists and perpetrators of these crimes? It's the Zionist entity of Israel, not the resistance. I'm not saying everything that happened was perfect and there was no, killing. Of course, there was an element of that, but nowhere near the extent of which they claim. And the problem is the damage is done. This is kind of
they had to claim that for that proper
was used.
atrocity propaganda was used to justify what came afterwards, what we've seen for the last 12 months. They had to.
They had to.
And it's all proven to be a lie. But when the West have the upper hand, when they have the media machine at hand, and they can get away with these things. It's so clear, everybody can see it, and you speak to many Muslims, non-Muslims, and they will admit and say, yeah, it was a lie. And this is why now they are losing in the court of public opinion, because they have completely shattered their own image, ruined it, and there's no going back from this now for them. It's there, it's out in the open. If something, I was saying this to some brothers the other day, like if something was to happen where a nation broke rank and thought, you know what, we're going to go and attack Israel, I don't think the majority of the population in the world would even be against that, which is crazy, right? And they know that. They know that. America know that. Israel know that. That's why they are trying to be very careful with what they do. But I don't want to labor the point anymore, to be honest.
No, of course. I mean, the thing is I think that personally, you guys have touched upon it in terms of a limited operation, mainly a case of, taking possession of loads of hostages, which is something which they've done previously. The resulting actions by the Zionist state, I don't think that was factored in. But the thing is at the end of the day, whether it's to do with the fact that the Zionists are thinking, or they thought at the time, this is now our opportunity because we've painted this picture of this barbaric attack. The Western world is on our side. Basically, we can do whatever we want. So now's the time to let's deal with this matter. Or even if it's the element of they had to reinforce that deterrent, the idea of them being invincible, which hasn't worked because you just kill innocent people doesn't make you invincible, just makes you a mass murderer. Um, but I think that, in terms of the resistance on that day, I don't think they had calculated the response, which then makes you think that a year on now, when you think about it, I know there was a lot of questions at that time. Was there collusion? Did they know? You know, um, knowing now history from 1948, 47, around that time, 67, up until recently, their open talk of retaking the whole of, from the river to the sea and stuff like this. When you think of this, I personally, my opinion is that I think there were security intelligence failures on the day. Um, I still personally don't believe they allowed it to happen, even though there are signs that point to that. I don't think this was the case. I think that they were just caught unawares. Their arrogance led them to go into snooze mode, even though some would argue that's incredible because this is the most surveilled area in the world, some people say, right?
Mm.
Um, but I think once this attack happened, you know, like previous conflicts, it wasn't a case of let's just bomb Gaza for a little while, let's try and get our
Mm.
hostages back. I just think they thought that's it. We're going to drive them out now. And you can see
Mm.
this from the fact that they don't care about their hostages. I don't think anyone can argue that they even you ask the people on the streets that are demonstrating in Tel Aviv, they don't care about the hostages. The only time any hostages were really freed on a mass scale was when there was a ceasefire. They've bombed, you know, they've made Gaza into rubble and their hostages are under that rubble, right? That's not how you
Yeah.
free
Yeah.
hostages. So I think personally, a year on and reflecting, and you guys might have a different opinion on this, I don't think that it was a case of them allowing it to happen. I think there was, huge intelligent failures. Um, but I just think they've milked it in terms of
Yeah.
now we're just not going to look back.
I agree with that. I think yeah, you can have a different view. I don't think we would really know unless there was some evidence as to say there was collusion, or I don't think there is any evidence of that. But I agree with you. I think they've utilized it in the most, they've basically milked it. They've utilized it in the best way possible from their perspective. And look, there's context, isn't there? If you think about Netanyahu's situation at the time, he was, facing these charges. He was thinking about the fact that he's going to be removed. So therefore, he thought this is the opportunity to really utilize what's happened. And as I think we spoke on a previous podcast, the fact that he thought that if not now, then when? From his perspective, like if we're going to do it now, this is the opportunity. We've got this far right kind of cabinet who will support me in doing what I want to do. And therefore, if we want to really achieve our greater goal of like greater Israel, and it's now. Otherwise, if you start getting kind of more left-leaning, more diplomatic, they still want the same goal. Don't get me wrong. The chances are less because you've got America being more involved in kind of the two-state solution and things like this. So I agree with you. I don't think it was all planned out like covertly like that. I don't think so. There's not much enough evidence of that, but I do think they have utilized it in the most, the greatest way possible from their side.
Yeah, and I also think that if we try to look at it in a different way, like look at the aftermath and some of the things that have been detrimental to the image of Israel, right? I think, or is the Zionist entity, I should say, that they prided themselves on a certain military doctrine, right? And they pride themselves on like these 6 principles, and all 6 of them have been damaged. Some of them damaged to no end, right? So the 6 principles are: firstly, they have this principle of preemptive strikes. Then they have a principle of early warning system. And they have a principle. The third one is effective deterrence. And the fourth one is having a strong defense. Fifth one is quick resolution, and the sixth one is escalation dominance. Right? These are the 6 that they talk about. Right? And they've all been shattered. First and foremost, preemptive strikes. They've always, during most of the conflicts, they've been the ones that have hit their so-called enemies first, right, with preemptive strikes. But October 7th, that completely shattered that, right? They didn't know what was the extent of what was going to, the scope of what was going to happen. I don't think so. So that's been shattered. The second one of early warning system, they've always prided themselves of having like human intelligence networks, right? Unparalleled, best in the world. They talk about our intelligence is the best. We can neutralize enemies through our advanced technological, surveillance, all of this type of thing. But this colossal failure, like Maju said, on October 7th, this colossal intelligence failure, that's completely blown that out of the water as well. Thirdly, effective deterrence. I'll very quickly touch on that. They pride themselves on posturing in a way that they deter their enemies from attacking. But look what's happened now with Yemen, with Lebanon, with the Iran missile strikes. They have not managed to deter the people from daring to attack. They've always said nobody would dare attack us, but now look. And then they pride themselves on strong defense, right? And they say that we have an invincible army. Well, that's gone out the window now. You can't even take out a militia group. You've been fighting for 12 months with them. What strong defense are you talking about? What strong military are you talking about? The citizens themselves are scared. They're feeling vulnerable. Half a million have left Israel, gone back to Europe or America. Quick resolution, that's the other one. They have always said that we can resolve issues within days, weeks. This has been going on for 12 months now, and you haven't even managed to achieve any of your war goals in Gaza, right? Even though you mentioned like they don't really want, it's not really about the hostages, but in terms of dismantling the resistance and Hamas, and they've not been able to do that, to drive out the population. They've not managed to do that. And then the last thing is escalation dominance, where they say that whenever something like this happens, we will escalate militarily and dominate the situation. But they haven't been able to do that either. They're being pegged back in most places. They're trying to go into Lebanon now, and they're getting severe losses. So yeah, I think from that perspective, they've not, it wasn't pre-calculated to that extent. They've just used the situation for their own kind of goals and objectives, but they didn't realize the kind of damage that's going to happen, not just on their image, but yeah, even their military dominance. And they didn't realize that will happen. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's an element that someone may argue they don't really care what the world thinks of them. They just arrogant and they just want to get on with it. But okay, a year on, I want to address the elephant in the room, as they say. As we're reflecting about, the events of October the 7th, a year on, let's now touch on the response of the Ummah, which we can obviously assess because it's been 12 months in terms of what's been happening, and in terms of how effective our actions as an Ummah has been in terms of, I wouldn't even say liberating Palestine. I would say just for this genocide to stop. JK, man, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as Khairul was saying, and very similar in the sense that whilst the genocide itself and what's happened is very difficult to see over the last 12 months, and it's continuing, isn't it? It's not good to see those images day in, day out. So it's very sad. However, there are elements of positivity that you can take from this event. One is, like you said, the kind of image.
No, not the. I'm not on about the positive. What we could take from the event. I'm talking about
The Ummah.
over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
If we can assess
Yeah.
response of the Ummah to these events.
Yeah, no.
That's
So
what I want to touch on.
No, I'm getting at that. So what I'm trying to say, that is an example of like something you can see that's a bit positive. But also, I think a big positive from this event is the response of the Ummah. One thing that we've seen is that Palestine, and it always has been this case, but even more so now, with this 12 months since this event, is that it is a unifying cause, right? The Ummah at large has unified around Palestine. Yeah, in terms of their feeling for Palestine, the fact that they are against the occupation, the fact that they want its liberation, um, completely, and even many have even really gone away from the solutions that we've been given to them in terms of like two-state solution, and no, they want the complete liberation of Palestine, which is really positive, right? And also the unification in the sense that it doesn't matter whether you're Sunni or Shia, all type of Muslims want the liberation of. If you don't want the liberation of Palestine, I genuinely would question your iman. Really, I would. Obviously you can't get. I don't want to get into that too much, but you would, because it's a case of this is an Aqidah matter. Every Muslim wants the liberation of Palestine, right? So what we've seen is that whilst there have been some people that have still gone a bit sectarian on some of this stuff, by and large, that sectarianism has gone. And there are Muslims that are supporting the Houthis for what they're doing, despite them being Shia, supporting what Iran is doing, despite them being mainly Shia. So what I'm trying to say, there's a unification over the cause of Palestine and recognition that these differences, whilst they are there, that can be addressed afterwards. The key aim now is looking at the enemy doesn't care whether you're Sunni, Shia, whether you're Kurdish, whether you're Turkish, or any of this, right? They don't care. They will kill regardless. They went into Gaza and did the genocide. They're doing similar in Lebanon now. One is Sunni, one is Shia. They don't care, right? So I think one positivity is that unity of the Muslims, right? I think the other thing in terms of the reaction of the Ummah and some kind of advice I'd say is that we have looked at many different solutions really to what's happening, right? We've looked at the UN and thought about, what is the UN saying? And whilst the UN may have said some things in terms of UN resolution, some of the speakers talking about what Israel is doing as being beyond, this is plausible genocide, the ICJ rulings, the ICC rulings against the individuals. Whilst all of this is generally, you'd agree with, actually, they've not actually achieved anything. They've not been able to stop the genocide. So I think a lot of Muslims are recognizing the failure and the toothlessness of these institutions, which is alhamdulillah positive, but many still may be looking at that. And I think hopefully over the next 3 months, they'll see that there is no kind of hope from these institutions, these Western institutions, right, that were set up for a certain purpose. We also saw in the UK the democratic elections to kind of punish Keir Starmer and the Conservatives, but actually, and they started to vote for independence. But actually, what have we seen as a result of that? Not much. The independents haven't been able to do anything, right? And that's my advice to many, that this we should recognize that this is not going to achieve anything. This will not achieve the liberation of Palestine. And to Muslims in America, they should recognize similar, because they're going through that now with Kamala Harris and Trump. Just voting for an independence is not going to achieve anything, really. It won't, right? So these things we've seen. We've seen the fact that just dua is not going to be a solution. Just charity won't be a solution. Boycotting, whilst it hasn't had an impact, won't be a solution. So my like, to answer your question, the reaction from the Ummah has been positive in unifying for it, but I think there's a little bit more to go to recognize that all of these solutions that we're trying to do and we can do really won't achieve much until we think about the actual solution, which is a physical military solution in removing the occupation.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot to come back on that, but what I'm gonna do is, I know Brother Khairul has to leave soon. So what I think of, rather than just
So,
prematurely ending the podcast, what we'll do is get Khairul's thoughts, and then whenever he wants, he can just drop off, and we will continue,
yeah,
inshallah. Khairul, go for it.
yeah,
Yeah, Jazakallah. No, I think what JK said, of course, is spot on. The way I want to look at it, though, is slightly differently. We know we've spoken about the victories of Gaza. Of course, the Gaza genocide is heartbreaking. We don't want to see our brothers and sisters going through what they're going through at all, and we all feel like we need to do something. And from this, we've seen many victories. And some people might say, "What are you on about victories? Like,
yeah,
how can you look at what's happening there and call these see victories from it?" But there has been, right? And we have to trust in Allah's wisdom, right? From the Gaza genocide, we've seen people's hearts being more attached to Allah. We're seeing through this they're teaching us the true meaning of having sabr, of being brave, of sacrifice, tadhiya, taqwa, tawakkul, all these things we can see it. It's a live example of how to embrace and embrace these concepts and live them. widespread boycotts, and we know that it's not the solution, but that in itself, it's brought out a bit of a hatred amongst the Muslims that look, we hate them so much we're not even going to buy any of their products. Obstruction of the normalization, that was another good thing to come out of this. Exposing Western values, as he said, this growing spirit also of wala al-bara, love and hate for the sake of Allah. It's grown amongst the youth as well. And that's another big thing to talk about, that the youth this is like the 9/11 moment for them, right? All of these things is unity, the spirit that's growing, the growing awakening in Iman, and in the speaking of jihad again. These things are all positives, right? We can call them victories. But one thing that we noticed throughout the last 12 months is there became a period where there was lulls, right? It was happening. People probably expected it to stop, and they've kind of switched off from it. But I think this 1 year anniversary is good because it will bring it back to the forefront of everyone's mind. 1 year, it's been 12 months, it's still going on. Now is not the time to sit back and, retreat and be passive. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَّا التَّهْلُكَةِ. He said, spend in the cause of Allah and do not let your own hands throw you into destruction. Right? And Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he spoke about this verse, and he said he explained what this verse was about. He said, this was revealed to us, i.e. the Ansar, and we can explain it the best. He said it was when Allah gave Islam authority and power, and we started to talk that jihad was not necessary anymore. And that we could stay at home and we can take care of our wealth and our families and our property in this. Thereupon did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveal this verse, which made it clear that destruction here means the abandonment of jihad. So we need to understand that we need to continue this work. Like, we cannot abandon the struggle. Our brothers and sisters have given their blood and their lives away. They're sacrificing their lives for this. We cannot sit back and yearn to save them, but stay, shackled by the rulers and the borders of the system. No, we need to uphold these victories that I just talked about. These victories, we need to uphold them. Like I said, they've sacrificed their blood and lives of their children, of their women, of the men. But it's our duty now to preserve those triumphs, exert all of our kind of efforts to solidify them and not allow them to go to waste. And this is a perfect opportunity to now kind of invigorate ourselves to carry on. It's our duty. It's not something that's optional. This is a religious obligation. We have to do this, and we will be questioned about it. So yeah, that would be kind of my overarching kind of feeling and advice to the Ummah, that there's the good work that people are doing, continue doing it, but do more and understand what the actual solution is and work towards that, and don't let yourself fall into kind of despair.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, bro. It almost sounds like that was your final thought. And it probably is, because I know you do need to go. But one thing I would say, based on what you guys said, because you have painted a picture of positivity, I would say. However, if just say playing devil's advocate, a lot of the victories that you mentioned, Khairul, these are victories that were demonstrated by the people of Gaza, not the rest of the world, not the rest of the Ummah. And these are undisputed, right? So, to link it to, a kind of like probably a final question for you both really is the fact that a year's gone by. If you watch that video of that young man from Palestine, from Gaza, where basically he's saying, look, you're making dua, make our feet firm in Gaza, but ultimately we're doing what we can do. You understand? We're striving. It really boils down to what you're gonna do, right? And on that day of judgment, whether you can say that you did anything for Gaza, you did anything for Palestine, and that's what it really should come down to. Now, if I'm gonna look at the attention. Yes, there's definitely positives. I think one of the positives is that the Ummah has kind of concluded that one of the biggest obstacles are these rulers. I think that's,
Yeah.
that's something which is probably a bit obvious anyway, even before, but now it's like solidified. Like even those people who might have been, semi-nationalistic, are they're thinking like, listen, these guys are worse than they're worse than the worst, right? They haven't just been not doing anything for the Palestinians; they've been aiding the Zionists, right? I think that's out in the open. There was the issue to do with the democratic votes. I still see people on the internet say, I would say, pretty stupid comments when debating with people who are saying, what's the point of voting? What will it achieve? And you hear some people turn around and say, well, what did you achieve by not voting? It's like it doesn't make, what kind of question is that? It doesn't make sense. So you do still have people who are looking towards this system. However, ultimately, what I would say is that a year on, I think we can, um, I think, comprehensively conclude that many of the things that the Muslims were first inclined to in their first reaction hasn't stopped anything, right? It hasn't. That's a fact. Whether it's international law, international community, whether it's to do with boycotting, whether it's to do with protests, whether it's to do with charity, all of these things which have been done in good faith, right? They haven't stopped the situation. And now what we're seeing is possibly the Gazification. That's a new term that I've just made, the Gazification of Lebanon, right?
Yeah.
None of these things are going to stop it. So, my kind of final question to you both, and Khair, if you do have time, I'll probably start off with you and then take JK's thoughts on this. Is I know you don't have a crystal ball. I know your nickname isn't Mystic Meg. However, what is your forecast for the next year? Now, after all of these things we've mentioned, after all of these things, I think that the Ummah, if they put hand on heart, say these will not stop the problem, I think a lot of the Muslims, which is another victory, I would argue, and another plus point, which is I think they know now deep down what the solution is. But what do you think will happen in terms in the next year? Do you think that the Ummah will mobilize in terms of doing what needs to be done? And listen, this is purely opinion based because this is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But based on the last year, what's your opinion?
It's a good question, actually. He's put me on the spot there. Within the next year, I mean, I don't think anybody can truly say that right now the Ummah is at a position where they are now going to mobilize in the way that needs to be mobilized. I think there's been progression in the last year, but not enough as much as you would have thought, right? To be honest, I thought when this happened, I thought this is going to change people that like to no end. And it did. There was initial really positive signs. But as it dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, you saw people just going back to their old ways, people getting kind of dreary, and this real zeal that we saw initially with, okay, a lot of it was maybe a bit of hot air as well, and going out and really protesting, and that in itself is meant for, is those protests are, that's one of the objectives, is just to really drown the emotion from people, because how much can you keep doing that without seeing any real change? So if the Ummah do not realize that, look, we need to really continue with this zeal, but put it towards the correct solution, the correct action, then it's just gonna drag on like this. I think uh, we're still in a little bit of sleep mode. It's very difficult when you're speaking to some Muslims to really motivate them to go and do something, because they just in a bit of despair. So I don't think this next year is really, we're going to see much difference. I don't know if you guys have a different feeling from who you're speaking to, but to me it doesn't seem that way. You're still really having to work very hard just to get some people to do something. People are just going back to their old lives, and obviously, they want to do something, and I think it boils down to the fact that they can't visualize what is required to then, and how that will make the change. And that's where the dawah carrier comes into play, right? That's where we need to make people understand this is what's required. We need to move that blur from their eyes and say, this is what you need to do to get to here. But even more fundamental than that, and this is what I try to cover in some of my khutbahs, is that from an aqidah level, like, yeah, you can ask these questions, but do they actually even fully appreciate it from an aqidah level, that this is their own salvation is at stake here? They're thinking of the salvation of the Muslim brothers and sisters in Palestine. I'm saying your own salvation is at stake here. If you're not doing anything, you're destined for the fire. This whole what's happening right now is a test for you. Allah is testing all of us, and I mentioned this in my recent khutbah, and I'll find the verse of the Quran, verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is in Surah Al-Imran, He says, do you think that you will enter paradise without Allah proving which of you truly struggled for His cause and patiently endured? Allah's asking all of us, do you think you will enter paradise if I don't put you through some sort of trial for you to prove that you truly struggled for the cause and that you were patient? If you don't think that, then you don't understand why you're here, right? And Allah will replace us. So, and that's the scary thought. Right now, the Ummah, I don't think is that. If someone asked me, like, give me a straightforward answer, I would say this generation, I don't think is within them. I think this generation is potentially going to be replaced by a future generation that will do what is required. Because right now, we're not doing what is required.
Subhanallah, bro.
And sorry to end it on a bit of a damp note, but that's just my thoughts.
No. Obviously, I kind of like your points resonate with me. In all honesty, JK, what are you saying, bro?
Yeah, and similar. I think sometimes we just need to speak the truth, and I think that's what Khairul done. Just really thought about it, and that whilst there are positives, let's be real, right? And I think similarly, I can't add much more to that, but what is the Ummah? When we think about the Ummah, what is it? It's made up of different elements, right? You do have the general layman that will follow, still obviously is following his kind of rituals and what he needs to do, but actually doesn't have much influence. This will be the majority, but they still play a role because they are the majority of the Ummah. But then you have other actors in the Ummah in terms of influencers, whether they are scholars, whether they are speakers, whether they are da'is. You'll have this group of people. You'll have the military leaders who have capability from a military perspective. You have the leaders of Muslim nations and future leaders who have even more influence and ability. They all make part of the Ummah. Whilst you might argue some of the leaders are on the brink of not being part of the Ummah, but yeah, they're Muslim leaders, right? I'm not going to start making takfir of any of them. But what I'm trying to say is they're part of the Ummah, right? It's just sad that they're not in these roles that we have. There's limitation, there's lacking in all aspects, and I think Khairul has spoken a bit about the kind of lacking within the majority of the Ummah in terms of that understanding of what's required, that understanding that this is part of our own salvation and it's part of our Aqidah. We are also being tested, absolutely. To be honest, we're maybe being tested even more, even though we're not going through the physical persecution. But if I take it to kind of add to that answer, what about those who have certain positions, even including us? I'm not trying to like shift the blame, including us. We have that security and safety. We might even have an element of knowledge, whilst there's much more to learn. That we should be using that to really educate and bring people about, right? But take them in the right direction, move them along. But similarly, scholars, they need to continue talking about this and really talking about the actual solution, referring back to the seerah, referring back to what our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do in such a situation, what he did do. What he did do, and take lessons and learnings from that. This is a part of our methodology in terms of change, right? Then you have the military and those who are in the military, they have a level of capability that they will be more accountable. especially for those militaries that are surrounding that land, right? They have a level of accountability that is beyond me and you, right? Then you have the leaders. They have even more of an accountability. And what the sad reality is that not only are they silent, like you said, they are actively involved in enabling the Zionists, and you could call them Zionists themselves, like I mentioned previously. So I think the reality is, to go to your question, what will be my prediction for next year? Because of this reality we have with these aspects of the Ummah, you know, I think not much, really, not much in terms of change. Because, as Khairul mentioned, I thought this was the moment. The killing of Nasrallah, your main leader, doesn't provoke a reaction that's beyond what we've only seen. There's Iranian strikes. What else can it take? What more can it take, right? The killing of a Ismail Haniya within Iran, within your sovereign land. If for me, these are steps that you think, okay, now is the red line. Something must happen now, and it doesn't happen, and we're not surprised. That tells me, what more does it take? Forget that, killing of 40,000 more. The Lancet study is saying almost 200,000 Palestinians have died as a result of the genocide. And still nothing happened of significance, of meaningful change. So then, we have to be real with ourselves. What more will it take?
And sorry, Madge, I know you want to say something. I need to go, but I just want to add on to that point is that look, I feel like the Ummah is a bit frustrated, in a bit of despair. Even ourselves, like JK just said, like some of these events that occurred, the killing of these leaders, and you think this is going to provoke some sort of reaction. I think that's the nail in the coffin to say these lot aren't doing nothing. Not going to do anything. Doesn't matter what happens, man. These lot are so shameless. They only care about their own status and their own positions. So the Muslims need to understand that actually we cannot go into despair right now. We can't do that, and that's what they're preying on. The disbelievers, the hypocrites, they want us to become frustrated. They want us to have despair, to lose interest, to forsake the cause. They want that. They want Gaza to become an example to whoever who dares to resist, right? They want this genocide to continue and people to then return to being negligent, distancing themselves again. Then what will happen is the few people that are still supporting, who are still talking out about it, they will be persecuted, they will be criminalized. The majority of people, if we start to lose interest, then their laws, their solutions will start to be implemented, the two-state solution and all of this. Supporting Gaza will become terrorism, exposing the criminality of the enemies of the Zionists. That will become an offense. This is what the enemies want. This way, all of those victories we talked about of Gaza will become defeat. And that's what they do. That's how they work. Any sort of victory, they want to turn that into defeat. That's what they bank on. And we as an Ummah cannot let that happen. We cannot. This is too big of a opportunity for us to let this slip. This was the galvanizing moment. So really, it's desperate times for the Ummah. We need to see it in that way. And Muslims need to understand it in that way. If they don't, then it's like, yeah, forget it. Next generation is the one that's going to do it. We haven't done it. So at the end of the day, we're all accountable for our own actions. Those of us who are trying, may Allah accept it from us. May Allah use that as a reason to forgive us on the day of judgment, because without the mercy of Allah, it's destruction for us. And we need to put ourselves first in that sense, because So I just wanted to end it on that. I really need to go now. So
no worries, bro. Inshallah, I'm gonna kind of conclude anyway. But if you need to head off, mate, just drop off. Inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. I'm gonna drop off.
Jazakallah khair for joining, bro.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu
alaikum.
Yeah, JK, I know obviously you're in a bit of a hurry as well, so I'm gonna bring it to a close. But I do want to just end with a few points. One being emphasize what Khairul mentioned about salvation. Subhanallah. It just kind of occurred to me, that even this podcast, right? Even that section when I said to you, what has the Ummah done for Gaza? It's always, what have we done for them? What have we done for Gaza? What have we done for Lebanon? In fact, the question should be, what have we done for ourselves in this last year? Because ultimately, everyone's being tested in their own way. The people in Gaza, in Lebanon, they're being tested in their own way. We are also being tested. So when we think um, that, when we ask the question, what have we done for Gaza? Actually, it kind of like, it makes it out as if we're somehow doing them a favor, that we're going out of our way to do something for them. The reality is, what have we done for ourselves? Because we are going to be accountable for this. So as Khairul mentioned, subhanallah, it's not a case of, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, let me go back to my normal life now. This is something which doesn't end. It's continuous, because this life's a test. Every stage you're going to be asked. So you can easily go to a demonstration, do your thing, that's fine, alhamdulillah. But you come home, you felt like you've done your bit for Gaza, but your bit for yourself never ends, never stops. Every atom's weight of good, every atom's weight of bad will be put in front of you on the day of judgment. So I think that's something which was really, really important, which kind of like resonated with me, man. And I thought I needed to express that. And one last point I want to mention, based on what you said, you mentioned about the responsibilities of the Ummah and people within the Ummah, being the people in the militaries, people in the power, and because, like you said, you look at the state of these institutions or these people, then, in a year, if we're weighing it up and thinking, well, to be honest with you, these guys are so bloody rotten, in a year, I can't see much changing. What I would say to that, I agree with you. What I would say to that, though, is another way of looking at it is, okay, we've identified what needs to be changed,
Exactly.
right? Because, and the reality is these lot don't need to be reformed, they need to be changed. That's the reality. So if we're thinking they need to be reformed before anything changes, then forget 1 year. This will go on for centuries.
Yeah.
The ultimate truth is, these guys, their legacies, right, are ones where they are treacherous, and they know treacherous overnight. They have been planted in the ummah. These people are not going to be reformed, right?
Yeah.
They need to be changed. They need to be removed. Okay. So that's not going to happen by itself. That's going to need some sort of action by the ummah. So the question is, what it boils down to really is the ummah willing to make that change in the next year?
Yeah, yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
trying to say?
yeah, I agree. I agree. You're right. Like, there's still there's an element of positivity, or a positive element, in the sense that if we've recognized that these things are rotten, and really need to be uprooted, like you said, not just, you can't make a rotten apple better again. You need to just remove it, right? You need to be uproot this rottenness from the ummah. That's a positive, but yeah, like you said, what action are we willing to take to do that? But as you mentioned, we're all accountable for our own actions. MBS is accountable for his actions, right? Just because he's not going to do it and he's shameless and it angers us, we're not accountable for what he does necessarily. We're accountable for what we did to really make that change happen. And that video you mentioned of the brother from Gaza, he's even saying that same message, that look, we've done our bit, victory or martyrdom, right? Either we're victorious against the occupation, or we're martyrs. Both are victory. But do we have the same mentality, right? Because for us, like you said, we're heading towards destruction if we can't really make a change happen, or it doesn't change our behavior, our kind of actions after such an event in our history that we've lived through, a live stream genocide that we've lived through on our people. This is the level of Nakba. This is the level of things that years down the line they will look back to. So this happened in 2023, 2024. What were the Muslims doing? SubhanAllah, if you think of it that way, it will be looked back like that, right? We're living it. So therefore, we have the opportunity right now, before our death. Our death will come soon enough, right? We'll be asked about this event that happened. 9/11 happened during our time. Maybe a bit young then. I've got an excuse, a little bit younger. I'm sure you were quite young as well. But what did we do? These events happened. Allah, placed our life, made our life, our ajal was during these events. will be accountable, no doubt. Every atom's weight of good and bad, as you mentioned. So yeah, I totally agree. There's yeah, whilst I don't think anything will happen in a year, we should have a level of hope in Allah. We should have that good assumption of Allah that things can change. Allah plans, and He's the best of planners. So therefore, things can change, but it will require change from us. It's not just wait on Allah as though a miracle will just be bestowed upon us. We have to be that mechanism, that vehicle of change.
Exactly, bro. And that's what it boils down to. So ultimately, if we think after a year, the Ummah conclude that all these other avenues haven't worked, and if they can really conclude, well, we know what the right way is,
Mm.
if the Ummah isn't willing to go down that route, then nothing will change in a year. And not because of those leaders, is because of the people,
Exactly.
right? Ultimately, yeah. But bro, listen, I know you're on a tight one as well, so inshallah, we'll bring the podcast to a close. For those listening to the podcast, watching it, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and like the video and share this with your family and friends. And also, please add a comment. What do you think has been the victories, or the real picture of a year after October the 7th, 2023? Have we given it too much positivity? Are we delusional? Are we deluded? Or, are we being realists? But it'd be really good to hear from you, inshallah ta'ala. And Jazakallah khair for my guests of the Khairul's not here, but JK, Jazakallah khair for joining me on very, very short notice. And on that one, until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.